Hey guys, this is Kelli Stewart, and we're just doing a kind of a brief update at the end of the court day to help people understand more of the ins and outs of things that we are left oftentimes a little bit confused about regarding the mistrial today in the federal court hearing that was in Las Vegas, Nevada regarding the Bunkerville stand-up. So we've got some of the legal team and Ammon Bundy here with us, and we're just going to have a little roundtable discussion.
That's if we can get Rick off the phone.
Rick off his phone.
I'm just giving him the info he wants.
We actually might have to, someone could call in and then ask Rick questions and we'd just overhear it.
They're texting each
Everybody
other.
might get an update.
They're texting each other right now, and they're 4 feet apart.
All right. I am not.
All right, so we have, well, and maybe Jeanette and Ryan want to hop in. I'm not sure, but we'll find out. So we have Morgan Philpott and Ammon Bundy, and we have Rick Kerber, and we have Ariel Rincon, which is Ryan Payne's fiance, and Ryan Payne was one of the defendants today also that was declared the mistrial under. We also have Jeanette Finicum, the widow of LaVoy Finicum, and now we have Ryan Payne. So Jeanette, we're just doing like a debriefing.
Who's it up?
That's fine. You look beautiful sitting there. So I'm not sure who wants to go first. I think one of the main questions is a mistrial good? And why was the mistrial granted when the dismissal was not necessarily granted? And so maybe we'll turn that to Morgan to help us understand why a mistrial was requested in the first place.
You may talk to you or to them.
You can talk to me.
You're coaching me.
Sorry.
All right, so a mistrial, well, first of all, let me go back a little bit. Most people, I'm guessing, who follow this think that they have an idea of what should happen. And we as attorneys also have that. I think the defendants have that. But the courts operate by a little different procedure. They can't just say, here's what should happen. They have to follow a procedure to get to what should happen. So when we commenced this trial, one of the things that we almost immediately began to request was a mistrial. And we based that request for a mistrial on discovery, information that the government is supposed to produce that we allege that they did not. So that concept or that request regarding a mistrial has kind of been present from the get-go of this current trial, which started on October 30th of this year. And a motion has to ripen. It has to go through a process of responses, replies, oral arguments, hearings. And the motion for a mistrial went through that process based upon certain legal precedent. For example, a case called Chapman, which deals with why and when a mistrial is appropriate for very similar circumstances to what we alleged were going on in this case. Now, some people say, well, why not a dismissal? Well, we did request a dismissal, and the federal defenders, on behalf of Ryan Payne, requested a dismissal. But the precedent that we believe the judge is following is a precedent that requires or begs a mistrial first. And so Judge Navarro scheduled a briefing and oral argument in January on whether or not the case not only is mistried, but now subsequently should be dismissed with or without prejudice. So that argument comes next. So from our perspective, a mistrial is wonderful. It's fantastic. It's what we asked for. It's what we wanted. It follows the natural process. Now, there are things that we don't like about a mistrial, like we wish right now all the defendants would be released on their own recognizance with their own promise to appear without any conditions. And we will likely seek that on behalf of our clients. But right now, we are very happy with a mistrial. And yes, we requested it for very specific reasons.
Okay.
Now back to you.
So now back to me. What about Wooten? What about the Wooten files? Was any of that discussed?
Okay, so
That's a bumper sticker. What about
right, Rick, do you want to say anything about
I'm gonna create the bumper sticker. I can't say anything about it, but I can ask. What about Wooten? No, let him answer first.
Okay, so was anything discussed today about Wooten? Did she address any of the prosecutorial misconduct, the emails that came forward? Was any of that a part of today's hearing?
no, yes and no. I think no, it wasn't directly part of the mistrial. The mistrial was based upon 6 issues, from surveillance cameras to snipers to tactical operations center logs and maps. And generally what the judge said is these 6 things that you should have turned over that you did not turn over to the government. One, they were relevant to that's probably not the right term. They were of value. They were exculpatory in nature to the defense. She stated that your suppression was willful and that it prejudiced the defendants and the trial. And because of that, those 6 Brady violations would not allow the trial to proceed. Now, the question that follows is, what about everything else? Like, what about Wooten? And the judge ordered briefing from the defendants and from the government to discuss everything else. And so we have the obligation now, by January 9th, of filing essentially an omnibus brief on everything else, including what about Wooten. And she wants us to address in that omnibus brief, should we dismiss with prejudice? And of course we're going to argue, yes, not only should you, the court must, right, by legal precedent.
So that's actually December 29th. You have to have all that submitted, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. The hearing's on the 9th. We have to have it in. We get to have it in by the 29th.
Okay. So, and then the hearing's on the 8th.
Hearing's on the 8th.
Right?
All right.
That's okay. A lot of numbers today. It's been a really long day. So the other question I continue hearing is, what about the ankle monitors and what about Clive and Bundy? And I know you said you'll address all of that. Do you have a time frame? Do you think potentially by the time we find out from the judge on the 8th what her decision is, that we could already have answers to those, or will that all be kind of being hashed out at that time as well?
No, I think that's something that there is a pretty general consensus people want us to address as soon as possible. I think all the defendants would like their ankle monitors off and would like to have fewer restrictions for Christmas. And they'd like to be free men, understandably. So I think we're going to try and deal with that as soon as possible.
So this morning, I know that Maxine had posted the tweet about Ammon Bundy's conditions for Christmas being denied, and there was a lot of confusion on that to be able to leave for Christmas. And Morgan cleared some of that up today, and so maybe you could re-explain to the people why that motion came back as moot and why she didn't answer it, and if that means anything will change now for him to be able to leave for Christmas.
So there are 2 motions that were filed recently relative to Ammon's ability to alter the conditions of his release right now. And one of them was submitted, I think, on the 14th of December. And that's the one that was deemed moot because it dealt with modifying conditions last week. So That's no longer relevant. There is still an emergency motion pending that deals with Ammon's ability to go with his family and spend Christmas with his family in Las Vegas rather than having to kind of be under these conditions of a house arrest where he's got to be away from them during the holiday time, even locally here. So that's the second one. The article you're talking about by Francine deals with... Sorry, what did I say? Francine, sorry.
That Mountain Dew is a little strong.
I'm a little tired.
Yeah.
So the more recent motion is not moot.
Okay. So that will still be addressed.
Yeah,
More will be coming out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in just a moment, when they finish talking, we'll go ahead and ask just kind of what Ammon's response is, and then Ryan Payne also to today's findings. It's been a long 2 years. They've been detained for the majority of that up until just a couple weeks ago, and so today I'm sure there's a lot of emotions that have been going on and feelings, and so we're just going to kind of ask them how they feel about it. It's been a long battle. They've stuck in there, and they have not been willing to negotiate their terms because they of course are innocent as charged. And so in just a second we're going to turn the camera and ask you can go ahead and turn it now, so we'll just go ahead and interrupt. Louder?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just talking to the audience more about that. So now if we could maybe start with Ammon and then go to Ryan Payne and just ask kind of, it's been a long 2 years. You guys have been incarcerated. The majority of this, is this how you anticipated happening? Are you happy about how it's going, what's going on? And
Well, I just wanted to say that she got it all wrong because I'm guilty, that I did everything that I've been saying I didn't do.
Shut off the camera!
The federal government, the Bureau of Land Management, did no misconduct. The prosecutors are good guys and they didn't do anything wrong.
Look, he has finished a really strong hot chocolate with whipped cream, and he's not thinking clearly because he had a cherry on top.
So anyway, I just want to make that all clear. And to top it all off, I am guilty. No. Anyway, a good day.
He was standing up for his rights.
A good day. I can't say enough about the defense team. They've worked tremendously hard, all of them, and they synergize, they work together. Hey, this is a good thing. So
So you consider this
what do
a
you
win?
want me to say?
You consider this a win today? You feel like it's a step in the right direction?
Of course, we didn't get a dismissal.
Right.
We didn't get to be done today. But, somewhat expected a mistrial. Would have been very disappointed if we didn't get a mistrial, except unless it was a dismissal, of course. And this gives us opportunity to expose more, because we're going to litigate the Wooten stuff. We're going to litigate. There's just these 6 items. That's only 6 items. I predicted that we're going to have about 20 exculpatory issues when this is all done. And so, of course, that was my little prediction. And I believe that there very well could be by the time we're done. So that's where we're at. If it was a dismissal, we'd all go home and we wouldn't get an opportunity to expose this more. And we get an opportunity now to talk more about all these issues and to litigate them. And if we don't get what we want, we get an opportunity to appeal them and to really show the American people what is happening here and how their government, if you want to call it that, is doing what they are to the people. And so, we have to be happy with this and be pleased about it.
You're happy that there's been a lot of exposure to what you guys have been seeing for the last 2 years in this, and now it's finally coming out. Were you happy with the number of mainstream media that showed up today to cover this and to hear the story?
Yeah, there was a lot. It reminded me of Oregon with all the cameras and everything, and I think the headlines and different things have been pretty good. It talks about basically the government misconduct. I think Morgan did a good job of explaining, but I just want to emphasize when Judge Navarro was talking about willful, what that means. That means the government, the prosecutors, were willfully withholding that discovery, that they were willfully hiding it, that they were willfully not turning it over, and that basically that compromised the trial, it compromised the defense, and to me, as someone and my family and all of us who spent the last almost 2 years in prison, well, that willfulness caused us many, many, many months of tremendous suffering to us and to our families, to our little children, and to many other people out there that cared so much about us. That's willful. And that's just uncalled for, and we cannot allow that in those that supposedly are performing functions of government. So anyway,
you've been saying since the beginning all of the charges that were brought about against you guys, they were actually committing. And if there's one thing I hope the public is seeing today is that you guys were not exaggerating. And if anything, there are more charges that should have been added to the prosecution and to what they've been doing. And I definitely hope that justice is served, not just that the grief is relieved, but that justice is served, and that those who have intentionally been bringing harm to your families will be brought to justice, and they will be held accountable for their actions. I'm not sure that I believe it will happen, but I'm going to remain hopeful that these matters are dealt with all the way to the top.
When I look at I just want to point out, like, this exact same thing is what happened to the Hammonds, except the government got away with it. And we've got to bring those issues up. We've got to bring them back up. We've got to get the Hammonds home. This same thing is happening with Lavoie and what happened there. They're covering up. A little bit of it been exposed. So, this is the problem we have. So anyway,
is there regarding the Hammonds, is there any correlations you're making between the misconduct of the BLM out of your property and what they were doing to your water infrastructure and to your family that they were also doing to the Hammonds? That do you feel there's a correlation there, and there is just cause to look into that case again?
Well, yeah, but I'm also talking about their trial and the exculpatory evidence that Frank Papagni, the prosecutor up there, did not disclose to the defense team. And those are the type of things that I'm talking about. And there's the things that we uncovered when we were at the refuge. Them taking their property, the vindictiveness. None of that was turned over to the defense. So anyway, that's what I'm talking about. The same exact thing that happened in our trial happened in the Hammonds trial, but they didn't have the vigorous defense and the attorneys that cared. And I say that very openly. That will fight for the right reason and not just for money.
And the public support as well. I mean, during their trial, I didn't hear anything about the Hammonds, and I know a lot of other people didn't as well. It wasn't until after their second time being sentenced to go back and turn themselves in that the public started hearing even who they were, really. So
we got two men that's now been in prison for what?
2 years.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah.
But then after serving already, Stephen a year and Dwight 3 months, now that they're still in prison without a clear hope of getting out, and it's just wrong. We cannot stop here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ammon. So then Rick, I think, wanted to go ahead and add some things to that. This is Rick Kerber, one of the members of the legal team.
Well, one of the things that Ammon's talking about that has in common with his case and with the Hammonds case is you have to remember, in the justice system, the U.S. Attorney's Office has given so much latitude to decide on the charges. For example, the decision and how they prosecuted the Hammonds. They gave the prosecutors the discretion to use a law that was passed by Congress to address terrorism, and they used it against ranchers politically motivated to accomplish political agendas. And one of the problems that you've got in these cases is the whole system of law is based on this idea that the prosecutors will be fair. And it's almost, a modern day fiction that everybody buys into, because what do you do if you take that away? And so during trial and during all these proceedings, even in our case, so many times we would bring up arguments that, hey, the prosecutors are misbehaving, and at first when you bring that up, you just get dismissed out of hand, like, quit arguing, quit making those kinds of arguments. And the reason this victory today is important, and the reason it's bigger than just the Bundy case, is if you look at what happened is, in Nevada, this case was prosecuted not just by any assistant United States attorney. This case was prosecuted by the acting United States attorney. It's the third trial. They've prepared for years before they ever brought this case. And what the judge found today is that despite their years of preparation, despite having previously brought two trials to pass, having had all that, there was information that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office intentionally withheld. Now just think about that for a minute. That's now not a defendant making that argument. That's not just a political issue. It's not a political issue at all. That affects every American citizen who might face the court system, where you realize you just now have a federal judge who is making a finding as a legal conclusion that these prosecutors willfully withheld information. And if you listen, if you're in court today, the language she uses comes from a long-established doctrine of cases that says the reason we can't tolerate that is a violation of our Fifth Amendment to our Constitution that guarantees due process of law. Well, that's a phrase that most people don't understand, but it just means fairness. They were intentionally unfair. That's what the finding today was, is that the prosecutors cheated. They cheated. They broke the law. They broke the highest law of the land, the Constitution. That's not just now Ammon Bundy saying that, or that's not just now Clive Bundy saying that. That's Judge Anna Navarro. And nobody's going to say Judge Anna Navarro is in, excuse me, Gloria Navarro. I'm thinking of a political commentator. Sorry. Sorry. It's, as Morgan says, late day. Well, Judge Navarro is clearly not part of the Bundy fan club or the Bundy supporters. But what she did today, very deliberately, is she went through detail by detail, and it was an open court, it wasn't in a sealed hearing, where any citizen could see, wait a minute, these prosecutors, they cheated. And here's why that was even more important that some people don't realize. She made a couple comments today in her rulings. She referenced something that we hadn't been able to talk about before today. That it's sometimes in these closed hearings, when we brought these arguments up, one instance, the lead prosecutor accused us of asking for information that didn't even exist and called it an urban legend. We asked for a report that was really important, and the prosecutor told the judge, oh, that report's just an urban legend. Another time, we had filed multiple motions, and the lead prosecutor said to the judge, oh, this is just a distraction, Judge. This is a bright, shiny object that the defense is trying to distract the court's attention with. And in another instance, he said something like, it was a wild fishing expedition, and the judge today rebuked them in very professional judicial tones, rebuked them directly on those points and said, I don't find it was a fishing expedition. I find it was essential to their defense. This is information that says that Clive Bundy was telling the truth. Now think about that for a minute. And I don't want to take too much time or get too excited about this, but think about that for a minute. Clive Bundy's been sitting in prison for 2 years. A lot of other people have too. But Clive Bundy specifically was pointed on this indictment and called by his government a liar. And he was accused of lying when he said the BLM is here with automatic weapons surrounding my house. The government is putting my family at risk and in jeopardy. And the government said he lied. And he got all these people, he got all you American people upset by lying to you, because we would never do that. That's what they said. They said, we don't do that. In the opening statements at this trial, he says, oh yeah, the government of the United States doesn't do that. Clive Bundy misled people like Ryan Payne and like others to come here with these false representations. And here's what the judge said today. The judge says, I'm not going to allow that. Because the judge says the material that we have found shows that there were snipers, that they did surround the Bundys, that completely miles away from where the cattle operation was, they had a whole surveillance operation set up, and that's another lie she pointed out today. They lied to the court and said, oh, we didn't mean to surveil the Bundys' home, it was just kind of an accident. We were actually just trying to watch the road by their house. And the evidence came out that says they targeted the home. They took pictures, they listened to conversations, they monitored, took notes of cars coming and going. And the lead prosecutors who represent the Department of Justice in this case lied. They cheated. And so for years, American people have been saying, what's going on with the Bundy case? I mean, those crazy cowboys, I mean, you can't stand up against the government. I mean, you can't threaten the government. And what happened today, what came out today, that one of the reasons for the mistrial is that story that the government told about Clive Bundy was unfair, it was dishonest, it was factually inaccurate, and worse, the prosecutors couldn't say, well, we didn't know that, we were just told that by the FBI. They had been told that before. The FBI had information that there were snipers. The BLM had information that there were snipers. There were threat assessments. She referenced that in court today. There were years of threat assessments. I don't know if people realize this. The BLM and the FBI and the Forest Service and the Joint Terrorism Task Force, all these people, they had done assessments of Clive Bundy, his wife, his sons, his daughters. They had done personality profiles. They had done all of this background work clear back to 5-7 years ago. And it said they weren't likely to be violent. They were likely to protest. They were likely to call you out. They were likely to confront you if you were going to threaten their rights. That's what the government's position was, and that's what their intelligence says, and somewhere along the line, the lie got created that we had to build up this paramilitary force, that the Bundys were a threat. And if people were to see that, today was enormous, because that doesn't happen in our court system. It doesn't happen very often when a defendant is able to prove and have a federal judge agree that the prosecutors violated the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, so much so that the trial couldn't continue.
I'd like to bring up something quickly about the threat assessment and why it's so important. The threat assessment kept them from being granted bail. And because they were not granted bail, many of the defendants pled guilty. They didn't plead guilty when they were at home working on their case with their attorneys. They pled guilty when they were being held away from their families. You can think about in foreign countries when you hear of somebody being taken hostage and they're held away from their family, they're left in the dark, they're tormented, and the whole intent is to get them to be basically brainwashed by the other country or to actually give up information. That's exactly what our country did for 2 years. They withheld these people from their families, they denied them all of their rights, they locked them away in boxes and tried to get them to admit guilt when they were not guilty. So it's important to take into consideration how important this threat assessment is to them being denied bail because of how many people pled guilty, and the public doesn't understand why they pled guilty when they were not guilty. But when you understand when you understand what it means to be taken hostage and being withheld from your family, and you can't provide your children, mortgages are going without, not being paid, and wives are calling, you're hearing your babies saying, I want you to come home. That's torture. I don't care what anybody wants to say, that's torture. That's not due process. The Bill of Rights was not upheld in this case whatsoever. The speedy rights violations that occurred, the lack of bail, cruel and unusual punishment, the right to their own counsel. There's so many things in this case where the Bill of Rights was completely trampled on. So if you're an American who prides yourself in the United States Constitution and our freedom, then this case should concern you if for no other reason. If you're ever taken hostage by your government, you may not have the right to turn to your Bill of Rights and say, I'm innocent unless proven guilty. And when that happens, you end up doing and saying things you wouldn't have originally done. And in this case, for these defendants, many of them pled guilty completely under duress. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out. And then, let's see. Let's turn to Ryan Payne now and ask him a response from today and how he feels about the mistrial. Maybe if he anticipated it was coming or if he's at peace with it. What do you want to say, Ryan?
So I don't feel the necessity to parrot a lot of sentiments that I agree with that have already been stated. One thing I can say, and as briefly as I possibly can, is that these behaviors of our government are going to continue until we, the people, stop it. And because this is our government, it's not some other thing. When our government is doing these things to us, it's us doing these things to us. It's everybody else whose government this is doing this to us, to the people who are suffering these things. And it's not just us. We're a very small representation of an epidemic that is plaguing our system. It's systemic. It's not just the Bundys, and it's not just us other co-defendants that this is being done to. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people who are being persecuted as opposed to being justly tried and convicted for crimes. So it's going to continue until we stop it. And the quote comes to mind, and I've said it a lot of times, that when the people fear the government, there is tyranny, and when the government fears the people, there is liberty. And the key to that is the order of things. It's God, man, government, and government serves man just as man serves God. And the only way for these things to be corrected is for us to fear God enough that we make government serve us, as opposed to government being put in between man and God, and therefore our fear of government is higher than our fear of God. So we need to get more familiar with the scriptures, because the scriptures are a type and a shadow of these things that are happening to us now, and we will find a moral and upright path to make sure that our public servants do serve us, as opposed to serving us with tyranny, that they serve us with liberty, that they protect our liberty. So I guess that's about all I have to say.
Ryan, when you make the statement that we're to hold them accountable, do you mean things like the protest, like following this all the way through in trial and holding them accountable? What are you referring to?
Well, there's a progression to things. So, whatever is prudent, whatever a morally upright, spiritually sound individual finds to be prudent, that's what I mean. And so that depends on the situation, and it depends on the level of escalation of things. Is the government pursuing a political path? Well, they're pursuing a political path. Is the government pursuing physical force on people? Well, then they're pursuing physical force on people. And in order to protect yourself, you have to protect yourself, and you respond to whatever the situation is. But what does it mean to put them in, to make sure that your government is in fear of the people? That doesn't mean to threaten or intimidate the government or anything like that. What it means is that what is a businessman in fear of? A businessman's in fear of losing money. What is a lawyer in fear of? A lawyer is in fear of losing cases. So what does it mean what should it mean for a government public servant to be in fear? Well, by all rights, if they were morally upright, then a government public servant should be in fear of not serving the public in a way that would be acceptable before the Creator. But when we don't have that, then the Creator has to work through us to induce that into our public servants. And whether that's by replacing them or hurting them monetarily, somehow they have to be held accountable. So, I think that clarifies it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Can I ask, the public was asked to leave the room when you guys met with the jurors. Can you share any of the interactions with the jurors? Any statements they made to you? Were they aware of the case? Were they intimidated by you, or did they embrace you guys?
No, I think things became pretty clear to them very quickly. They were, for so few witnesses to have taken the stand, they really got a pretty good picture, it seemed like, within a short amount of time.
Ammon, can you share at all your interactions with any of them? Was it sealed, or are you allowed to discuss?
No, it wasn't sealed. They were no longer the jury when we talked to them. So,
did they give you any indication as to which direction they were leaning, as far as verdict would have gone, just based on what they heard so far?
Yeah, all the ones I spoke to said that if they went into deliberation now, that they would have acquitted us.
It would have been an acquittal.
Yeah, it was clear. They said that they could see what the government was doing to us. One individual I talked to, she said that she, 2 generations back, had a ranching. Her grandfather was into ranching, and she was excited to go talk to him about maybe some of the things that he had happen in his life when it come to the federal government. So anyway, that was the communications we had with them. They were very friendly, they're very open, and they were excited. Several of them wanted to go visit the ranch, and actually when the dust settled, to go out to the ranch. I told them that my dad would be very happy.
That's pretty impressive, since it had not even been moved yet to the defense side. This was all the prosecution, and you were winning over the jury.
Yeah, we were 3.5 witnesses in. That's it. Yeah, 3.5 witnesses.
Did one of the jurors come up and hug Ryan?
Yeah, one of the jurors, juror number 7, come up, literally came directly over and gave Ryan a hug, and because he was just pleased with the way Ryan was representing all of us, and also the truth that Ryan brought out to them, and he was grateful for that. And he also knew and understood that Ryan and all of us believed in the Lord, that we relied on Him. And with that, with that kind of being said, I just want to emphasize that there's no way that we could do this on our own. There is no way, and there's no way that anybody can go against the most powerful government ever known to man. And yet, Each one of us can, if we rely on the Lord, if we stay true to Him. And even though we might go through tremendous suffering, and our families might go through tremendous suffering, because we have, and many others will go through tremendous suffering, we can endure through it if we do not give up and rely on the Lord. And He will give us the advantage. He will. And we've seen that. And I hope that more than anything, that this is a testament that God lives and that He fights the battles of those who will stand up to what is wrong, no matter what. And I just hope that people realize that and understand that and live according to that.
Yeah, everybody wants to be a David when they're standing before Goliath, but very few are able. And I think that what most of us supporters have found is that we've met a family of Davids. It's been an amazing honor.
Although I appreciate that, I believe that everybody can. It's just a belief in knowing that God is there. I mean, it's just a hope. You don't really know. It's a hope, though. But that hope builds in you, and it turns into faith, and then it becomes a perfect knowledge. Because God is there. He created this earth. The sun, the earth rotates, in perfect order. We can predict a solar eclipse 2,000 years from now, with all the planets and the earth rotating in perfect order by the second or the millisecond. That's because God created it that way. There is a God. He does know who we are. He will protect and defend us. And He only asks that we do what is right and let the consequences follow.
Absolutely. You guys are definitely being an example to a lot of other people how to be a David. Not that you were the only David, but what it looks like to stand. Ammon, can I ask a question about, when we talk about the Constitution, we often talk about restitution. Have you thought through, at the end of all of this, how the government could make this right? Is there a way in your mind that they could make this right and be held accountable for their actions, restitution brought to you and your family? Is there...
In my mind, to be honest with you, there's conflict there. Because if we want to make them pay for what they've done, right, then we take a suit and we sue them, basically, and then we win, and then they pay us money. But really, who's paying that money to us?
We, the people, are.
It's the American people, the taxpayers, right? And so how is Myhre accountable for what he did?
Right.
He actually makes the people accountable for what he did. And so I'm conflicted. There is no way to hold these people accountable. At least that I can see. I don't see a mechanism, but yet we have to, because they'll just go on to the next one and say, well, if I did something wrong, the American people will just pay the bill. And we can't allow that to happen. When they are the ones making the decisions, they need to be personally accountable for it. And to be honest, I have no hate for the prosecutors, none. I know that they caused this problem. I know that people in the Bureau of Land Management and the FBI caused this problem that caused us much suffering. And I don't hate them for that, so I don't want accountability for that. Or I don't want vengeance, let's say that. What I do want is make sure that this doesn't continue to happen. And to make sure that more families don't have to suffer the way that we have. And so that those families that have suffered because of it, they can get relief, immediate relief. And so how we do that, I don't know. Morgan might have a better answer for me than that. Maybe Rick, these guys, maybe we don't have it yet. But I haven't seen the mechanism that creates personal accountability yet. So that's all I got.
So maybe now we'll just briefly read over the motion that was just filed, the emergency relief motion that was just filed by Brett Withal for immediate release of Ammon Bundy on his own recognizance. See, that's why we hang out with the attorneys, because they know all the words we don't understand. And so it looks like that motion was just filed. We're very thankful for his team and all the people who've been working with him. And it looks like the deadline that's automatic and is set for that is January 3rd. Of course, we hope that there is there is an answer before January 3rd, and we will be anxiously awaiting that. That would basically mean what? What are they saying? That he'd be released without any conditions?
Well, if he's released on his own recognizance, depending on the conditions they put on that, it could mean that he's released on his own personal promise to appear. And that's what we're aiming for, right? I mean, that's what we talked about for Ammon, and that's what Brett Whipple just filed for Cliven. We hope that gets granted. I think if the court grants, Brett Whipple's motion for Cliven, that's probably a good indicator of what the court's going to do relative to all the guys
moving forward. Can you tell me one last thing? What do we have workload moving forward? You have to respond by the 29th.
December 29th, we've got to file kind of an omnibus argument about why this should be dismissed with prejudice. That's our next big task.
That's the big task.
Yep.
Okay. All right, guys. I think we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope it answered some of your guys' questions about where things are at and what it means moving forward. I think everybody's positive and encouraged, and I think today was a win. So it's sometimes small victories, sometimes big. I think today was a victory. So we're going to hold on to that and believe in faith that Cliven will be home with his family soon, and we'll just keep fighting the good fight in the meantime. Thanks, guys. God bless.